Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Waterman, and I'm the Advocacy Director at City Parks Alliance. City Parks Alliance is a national parks urban advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C., with members across the country. Our work focuses on ensuring that everyone has access to a quality park. City Parks Alliance and our partners, the National Park Service, National Recreation and Park Association, the Trust for Public Land, are excited to host this Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program, or ORLP, Technical Assistance Webinar. Support for this work is provided by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I would like to share our gratitude to our guest presenters from the National Park Service, Elizabeth Fondries and Ginger Carter, who will give the main presentation. I would also like to introduce Bianca Schulacher from the Trust for Public Land, who has assisted public agencies in applying for ORLP grants and can provide some helpful advice during the question and answer period. The ORLP is a nationally competitive urban grant program funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The program was created in 2014 and offers grants specifically to help underserved communities meet their park and recreation needs. As many as you know, with full and dedicated funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the ORLP received a big funding boost. For this selection round, the National Park Service has funded the park at $150 million for eligible projects. In early June, City Parks Alliance teamed up with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, National Recreation and Park Association, and the National Park Service in hosting an ORLP webinar that provided a general overview of the program. A link to that webinar recording is in this chat. This webinar is more of a technical assistance webinar and has never been done before. National Park Service staff will review specific program requirements, identify common proposal issues, provide tips on how to write a strong ORLP application, go over the suggested formats for the forms, and answer questions. We have allocated an hour and a half. Just a heads up that Ginger and Elizabeth will be covering a lot of material in some detail, so hang in there. We will be breaking up the presentation with a few question-answer periods following some slides, and then we will hold a longer question-answer period at the end of the presentation. Also, we have provided you with 4 handouts, which you can find in your control panel and download to your device. They include the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, the Land and Water Conservation Fund State Assistance Program Manual, the 2010 Census Bureau Qualifying Urban Areas so that you can see if your city meets the population threshold, and the application list. We have a great turnout today, and to ensure we can respond to everyone as questions or technical difficulties arise, here are some tips. To ask a question, click on the questions icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. Type the question in the box and click send. Feel free to send questions throughout the presentation. If you experience a technical problem during the presentation, please type it in the question box and send it to us. And if you missed something, don't worry. Links to today's recording, the presentation, and related resources will be emailed to all registrants. Okay, let's get started. Elizabeth and Ginger, take it away.
All right, Elizabeth, please let me know if you can see the PowerPoint.
I can, and just for everyone, so we're going to go ahead and we'll turn off our cameras for the presentation just to be less distracted, but we'll come back on for the Q&A at the end. So okay, so thanks everyone for joining. We're really excited to try this out, this new presentation format. So hopefully everyone will find it helpful. So as Julie mentioned, this presentation will build on the General Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program webinar that we've given in past years and this year on June the 2nd. And if you've not seen that version of the webinar or otherwise unfamiliar with the program, today's training may not answer your more fundamental questions. We'll sort of cover what we can, but we would encourage you to watch that general presentation as well, if you haven't, and CPA has the recording of the webinar posted on their website. So, instead, the purpose of this session is to deeper dive on the requirements and review the issues, as Julie mentioned, try to highlight some of the things that have negatively affected the scores of proposals in the past, and generally try to make you more, hopefully make you successful. So, next slide, please. So yeah, that's okay. So that's what we're going to cover today. So so just for a little bit of background, the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act was enacted in 1964 to assist in preserving, developing, and assuring accessibility to outdoor recreation resources. The state formula grant program, now administered by the National Park Service, implements this mandate by allocating funds to each state, DC, and the territories using a formula outlined in the Act for grant projects to acquire and develop land for public outdoor recreation. Passage of the John Dingell Conservation, Management, and Recreation Act in 2019 and the Great American Outdoors Act in 2020 secured mandatory and permanent annual LWCF funding at the fully authorized level of $900 million. Of this amount, the state formula grants program and ORLP is set to receive at least 40% of that amount, or $360 million. The ORLP is an adjunct effort to the formula grant program and was developed in 2014 with support from Congress. It is not authorized on its own, so it's implemented largely under the rubric of the formula program. However, unlike that program, for which the states really have the primary role in solicitation and selection, the ORLP program is nationally competitive. So Congress chooses to decide whether to allocate funding to ORLP as it comes out of the LWCF formula allocation, and this happens during appropriations. So thus far, since the program was created in 2014, the funding has increased pretty dramatically. Our very first year, we got $3 million, and that's grown steadily to the $125 million this year that Julie noted. So our fifth grant round is currently underway. It was announced in May, and as mentioned, $150 million is available, and this is comprised actually of the $25 million appropriated in FY20 plus the $125 from this year. So that's the big pitch to get projects. So assuming that some of you have familiarity with the formula program, on the next few slides, as we outline ORLP, we're going to compare it to the formula program so you might better understand how the programs are similar and different. So next slide, please. So all projects eligible for an ORLP grant could also be funded under the state formula grant program. However, not all projects eligible for formula grants would be eligible under ORLP. The ORLP has specific program goals and eligibility requirements that projects must meet to compete. And we will go through some of these more important differences to help emphasize what is eligible under ORLP. If you find that your project that you're considering cannot meet all of the ORLP requirements, we want to encourage that your state's formula funding grants may be a better fit for your project. And I do want to qualify our comparisons here that the state formula grants program isn't necessarily quite as unrestricted as we've presented it here, because it is possible that your state may have some specific priorities, preferences, or other considerations that relate to these things that they do consider when making funding decisions. So you would be able to, figure those out as part of by looking at their statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and or their open project selection process. But from a national standpoint, this is the parameters as we presented them is how they appear. So an example might be that there are a few states that target projects in underserved communities for their formula funding, like ORLP does. But you're not necessarily going to see these things as strict eligibility factors the way you do for ORLP. So first things first, population and location. So the issue of eligibility is really the area where we get probably some of the greatest volume of questions. It might be helpful to put things in context by noting that the ORLP was created in part to respond to complaints that larger cities were not being served by the state formula grant program. This was a few years ago now, but at the time, the program was receiving only about $40 million a year in total, so a lot less than we're getting today. And most states' apportionments were less than $1 million and consequently offered very correspondingly small grants, which made it difficult to support high dollar projects, particularly in urban areas. In addition, there was some ongoing interest from the administration at the time to find a way to resurrect the Urban Park and Recreation Recovery, or UPAR program. This was another park and recreation grant program that was targeted for economically distressed cities. So these considerations led to the adoption of the census-designated urban areas as a basis for eligibility in this program. Urban areas are geographic concepts. Their boundaries encompass areas of 50,000 or more people that are densely settled. Although urban areas are often centered around and named for a particular city or even a couple of cities, they don't reflect jurisdictional boundaries. And depending on the density, the urban area can overlap with all or only part of a jurisdiction. Sometimes an urban area can comprise all or portions of several small cities or towns whose populations collectively total 50,000 people or more. Or sometimes they're really large areas that include multiple cities. Because the urban areas are not jurisdictional, we have included the additional factor that the project sponsor themselves must be a city of at least 50,000 people. Or if the sponsor is a county or state, the projects must be in or serve a city of 50,000 or more. So, I mean, that means a county may not, for example, go by its, the county's population, even if it's a county park, or combine jurisdictions within the county to meet that population requirement. Additionally, the population count must be based on the 2010 census because it's the last official count. The FY 2020 hopefully will be available soon for use in the, so we would have it for the next ORLP round. So if your community was pretty close to meeting that 50K threshold in 2010 but didn't, hopefully now you will meet it and you'll be able to be eligible by the time of the next round. So I'm going to kind of illustrate this a little bit, so if you can kind of jump over to the next slide and then we'll come back to this one. So if you all have seen our presentation before, you might recognize this slide, but we're going to spend a little more time on it to try to explain how this works. So this is the Las Vegas and Henderson urban area. And so ideally when we're talking about projects, we want the project sponsor city, the project site, and the target community served to all be located in one census designated urban area. And it's okay if the project site is on the borderline of the urban area, but outside it, this actually isn't uncommon because of, there aren't people or, people living in the parks, hopefully. So to determine if you're eligible and your project is eligible, it's best to look up the urban area map for your area, keeping in mind that the urban area may be named for a larger city that you are proximate to, and then locate your project site to see if it's within or abuts the boundary. So on this map for Las Vegas and Henderson, the green line depicts the boundary, and you can see that the urban area actually includes a number of jurisdictions. Further, you can see how the urban area boundary doesn't follow the jurisdictional lines of all the places within it. So some jurisdictions are completely within the boundary, like Paradise, and that's the purple polygon in the lower center of the map. Whereas others, like North Las Vegas, which is in sort of the northeastern part of the map, are only about half in the boundary. And you can kind of tell that because the purple polygon sort of extends beyond the green line. So the population density is only achieved in the southern part of North Las Vegas, whereas the north and east, it's less dense. So the project sites ideally then would be actually inside the boundary though. So in this area, the eligible cities would include Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas and Henderson. They're all well over 200. Las Vegas is even almost 600,000 people. But also included in the urban area are Paradise, which is a census designated place, as well as the unincorporated towns of Enterprise, Spring Valley, Sunrise Manor. These are all part of Las Vegas Township. They would be considered eligible as well because they are in the urban area and they have populations that exceed 50,000 people. However, if you look in the eastern part, that little yellow polygon, sort of in the middle of the map, or on the east side, that's the Whitney. That's an unincorporated town in Clark County. So they are in the urban area boundary. However, their population in 2010 was only 38,000. So they would not be an eligible entity to participate in the program. So if you can go back, Ginger, to the last slide. So hopefully that helps kind of clarify things a little bit more, and we can maybe take questions in a minute if people have want to follow up on that. But to finish this slide at least. So the last piece is the underserved communities part, and this is where applicants must show that their target community, so the community that is expected to be the primary beneficiary of the grant project, that they are underserved in terms of parks and other recreation opportunities. So the funding opportunity is pretty specific in stating how underserved is defined for our program. And so what this means is the community in question must have either no existing parks within a half-mile area of the project site if it's just serving one community, or within a 1-mile area if it's serving a couple of communities. Or they could have some existing parks, but not enough to support the size of the population of the service areas, or that are otherwise able to satisfy existing recreational demand. So in this situation, you would want to provide an explanation and statistics to support the need for additional recreation opportunities there. It's probably the third part where we see the most confusion, or the third example, I should say. And so this is the community has some existing parks, potentially even an adequate number of parks, but that they're so deteriorated, obsolete, or underdeveloped that a major rehabilitation or redevelopment is necessary to significantly increase the number of people or user groups who could be served in a way that really would be equivalent to a brand new park. So by this, we mean the project should be transformative, so a complete rehabilitation of an existing site. So if the project is just to something like add just a single new amenity, or maybe it's replacing the existing amenities with updated versions of basically the same amenities, or just refreshing the site that's otherwise in pretty adequate condition, the project is probably not meeting the standard and might be a better candidate for the formula grant program. We do see a lot of very routine rehabilitation proposals for parks that are very popular and heavily used get submitted to our program. And while we can't deny that a refresh of a park like this can be impactful, these proposals frequently fail to make the case that their community is underserved. In fact, the community likes their park very well and uses it a lot. So we're really trying to get to the communities that have no opportunity or very limited opportunity. So, so for those kinds of proposals, like the formula grant program might be a better place to look. I guess we can go forward to now. I'll maybe sort of stop there and see if there are questions.
Yeah, there are a few questions, some related to these, some not. But the first question is, are there LWCF requirements for a public hearing prior to grant submission, in addition to the community engagement and planning meetings?
Well, we can talk about that a little bit more later when we sort of get to the application. But generally, there is supposed to be public meetings for the project. Although there's some distinctions here, and I think for the purposes of this, for the ORLP, we really want to emphasize the idea of public engagement, which we talk more about on the next slide. But that's a little bit different from from any sort of public meeting requirements that the cities may have, associated with applying for grants. So there's a couple different ways, although one may end up, helping to serve for the other.
Okay, the next question is there any way an agency can be a project sponsor?
An agency? What kind of agency?
It does not say.
Oh.
So I guess the answer is government agencies are allowed to be applicants. If you're talking about another kind of agency, maybe you could submit another question and be more detailed, and we can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd say so. We qualify this to say so. Only public agencies are eligible applicants for the program. So the project sponsor would need to be either a local government, which could, so that could be a city or, as we said, a county. It could be a special purpose district, like a park district, or a state agency.
Okay, the next question is, what happens if OMB changes the definition of a metropolitan statistical area to 100,000? Will communities over 50,000 but less than 100,000 still be eligible?
That's a good question. We will definitely, I think the way we're talking about this today is how we want people to understand it for this 5th round that's open right now. We will certainly have to look at when the census urban numbers come out, because it may well be that they, that they change the criteria or the definitions, and we'd have to look at whether or not that measure still really meets our needs. But we won't know that for a little while yet. But that's a good question.
Okay.
But for this round, I would focus on the 50,000.
Okay, and next question. So to confirm, a city of 16,000 population in an urban area of 50,000 plus is not eligible. If a project spans 2 cities, the total more than 50,000, would that make the project eligible?
The project sponsor has to have its own population of 50,000.
Or the city that the project is in?
Yes. Right.
Okay, so when talking about the distance, is it 1 mile by road or 1 mile as a crow flies? So I think we're talking about walking distance. So we want the target community to be able to walk to the park. So walking mile, so you're talking by road. Okay. So if the ORLP requirements, such as the minimum population, et cetera, are in appropriations language, will the authorizing language that is being proposed to make it permanent fix or change any of these criteria that are problematic?
I think I can jump in on that one since our urban community is working on a bill called the Outdoors for All Act that would codify the ORLP. And right now that bill has the population threshold at 30,000.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, and here was a clarification from the previous question. Can a state agency be a project sponsor? Are they considered as representing the urban area?
So the state agency can be the sponsor, but again, for cities and states, the project itself then has to be serving what would otherwise be an eligible city. So it has to be so the park has to be located in in a community of in a city of 50,000 people.
Okay, thinking about the Whitney in Las Vegas, the Whitney, I guess, area in Las Vegas, urban area, are incorporated places generally not eligible applicants? If so, doesn't that penalize these places that often are economically disadvantaged?
So Whitney, it doesn't, because the other towns, some of the other towns I mentioned, like Paradise, they're also unincorporated. Whitney is only not eligible because their population is 38,000.
Okay, with other federal funding, my town has been grandfathered in as an entitlement community, even though it doesn't meet the $50,000 population minimum. Was there more to this? Okay, is it possible for this grant? So no, with this grant, you're still going to have a population of 50,000. Can you clarify the population and location requirements for county and state agency applicants? So the population requirements are going to be the same. Even if you're a state or county applicant, you're still having to apply the 50,000 to the city or unincorporated area in which the project is located. That particular place still has to have 50,000 people. You can't go by the population of the county or the state.
Right. So for example, if a county, an applicant county had 500,000 people, and they had and there was a county park, but it was it was in a town of 5,000 people, that would not be eligible. So to be eligible, the park would have to be somewhere where it was serving a city of 50,000 people. So essentially, like the project has to be eligible as if a city were applying for the funding, even though it's coming.
Okay, sorry, I missed a previous question asking when will the round 4 selected grantees be announced, and what if you have not heard and you're applying to the round 5? This round, is that going to cause any problems? So no, if you haven't heard yet and you're applying to round 5, that's not going to be an issue. We do hope to be hearing soon we hope that the Park Service will be announcing the list of selected projects very soon. We don't have an exact date, but we're thinking it's going to be soon. So go ahead and start preparing. There won't be a problem if you go ahead and submit and you end up being selected. Okay, I just hit a couple more here. Instead
No,
of
I mean,
having,
are they specific to the things on the slide? Because otherwise I'd rather hold some of them to the end.
yeah, let's see. There's a bunch coming in, so it's hard to, okay. See. Yeah, they're just coming in a little fast. So,
Well, let's move on for now, and
I
then
think we can.
we have plenty of time at the end to.
okay.
We do,
All right.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay. All right, so continuing on, just in sort of the other key criteria for the program. So, so the other thing besides the underserved communities is that the communities are supposed to be economically disadvantaged. So, so low income communities. And so the projects, ORLP projects, must specifically meet the needs and wants of this, target community. So it's not enough to sort of have, basically have a low-income community be proximate, to sort of they happen to be near the project site, and because the goal of it is that the product really be about meeting their needs. So that so the needs of the general recreation needs of the larger community, of which this community might be a part. Again, that's sort of not quite enough. So when writing your project narrative, what you want to do is provide strong support for how the scope of the project was developed and designed with input from your target community, and how the planned recreation amenities reflect the community's user groups and demographics and clearly meets their recreation needs and wants. So besides, your write-up, this could include documenting, community meetings, surveys of, your potential park users, or evidence of other kinds of community outreach, letters of support, preferably again from members of your local community who will actually use the park and its planned amenities, and not other people who are sort of more more external, like your member of Congress. A lot of proposals, interestingly, kind of fail to make the case for how the project is desired by and will benefit the target community. And sometimes this is because maybe there isn't really a connection. Which again might mean that a formula grant would be a better source of funding. But in other cases, it's just not addressed in the proposal narrative. And you really don't want the reviewers to have to guess or make their own judgments about this relationship between the park and the community it's going to serve. Because underserved communities, being underserved usually reflects in part a lack of access, it is recommended that the project site be located within a 10-minute walk. We just talked about that a little bit. Of the target community, or a 20-minute walk if the project is serving a couple of communities. If the project site is accessible pretty much mainly by car or involves a difficult or distant access point, be sure to explain how your target community will be able to get there. And again, this is a common sticking point for convincing reviewers about whether the project can actually provide its stated benefits. Likewise, consider the planned amenities or recreation activities and whether or not they would require the park users to own special gear. That can suggest the project is actually intended to meet the needs of the larger urban area and not the target community. Finally, we recommend that applicants include information about poverty rates for the park's target community and the park itself by tract, which hopefully this is the same tract. And these rates should be compared to and ideally be higher than the rates of the rest of the city, county, or state. And if the poverty rate data actually don't help make your case, again, consider formula grants. We have had proposals where the park was located in actually a very affluent tract, but claimed to be benefiting lower income tracts that were much further away. And, and that honestly wasn't that compelling to the reviewers. Another example was a proposal where the poverty rate of the park tract was compared to the national rate. Poverty rate in that tract was in fact higher than the national rate, but it turned out it was actually a lot lower than the rest of the city and the county and the state. So again, not so compelling. So use data to help make your case, and if it doesn't help make your case, then it might mean that your project is not a great fit. Economic development. Proposals can receive points when the project has the potential to generate some economic benefits as well as the recreation benefits. But these should be indirect. It's not a goal of ORLP to support revenue generating activities in parks. Your proposal should be as specific as possible about describing things like anticipated employment and other economic opportunities. So for jobs, this could include short-term opportunities, so construction jobs are frequently mentioned, of course, but also long-term jobs, like such as new positions for park related to park programming or park operations that will now be needed as a result of the new park opportunity. The general economic development, these would be things that would be spurred by the increased visitation and use of the park that we would hope would be achieved as a result of the project, and that these would benefit the community by having additional dollars get spent on ancillary services in businesses around the park, such as restaurants, or places to stay, things like that. Not looking for huge new economic opportunities, but just some economic benefits. And again, this is the thing a lot of people sort of pass over on mentioning. So I mean, even if you offer like 2 new jobs, that's more than someone else might be talking about for their proposal. So so any new positions, mention them. Matching share. Both programs, well, the LWCF Act requires a 1-to-1 match. So that's true for both LWCF formula grants and ORLP. So 1-to-1 contribution of the matching share equivalent to the amount of the federal funding. In the past ORLP rounds, we actually did have a preference for proposals that included match above and beyond the 1-to-1 level. We have eliminated this for round 5. So no preference will be given to projects that commit to overmatch. However, we have retained the preference for proposals where the matching share includes non-public sources, preferably local, private and nonprofit sources, because this is a strong indication of broad support for the project at the community level. Many proposals don't have any other funding sources besides funds from the sponsor, so even a small non-public contribution can give you an advantage in your points. But note that you cannot get points for financial contributions if they are not actually part of your match. A lot of proposals we get talk about contributions from partners, and other kinds of contributions that are even sort of not monetary, but then match only with dollars from the sponsor. So that's something that you don't. I mean, that will help you sort of in terms of partner engagement support, but wouldn't give you a preference in funding support. So, but I'll note that sometimes the budget narrative is written or presented in a way that makes it really hard to tell where the match is coming from. So something new we're requiring this round is that you have to include, if you do have private contributions, that you might, or contributions from outside, that you must include a letter from each matching share donor, which clearly states the type of contribution they're providing. So is it cash, volunteer time, or whatever, and then estimate the value of that contribution. Limitations in terms of awards. A single park or other recreation area is generally open to getting as many state formula grants as the state and NPS choose would be eligible and appropriate for the site. For ORLP, we do limit a given park to 2 ORLP grants. So the second grant could be an extension or the next phase of the first grant, or it could be for something completely different. So maybe the first project was for I don't know, renovating the athletic fields, and then the second project might be for for trails and paving areas around the park. So it could be they could be related, or it could be a build out of the original element. So. But sponsors, sites that have received 2 ORLP grants could receive formula grants, so it doesn't restrict you from getting a formula grant program in the future. But the limitation is basically there to sort of help ensure that the ORLP dollars get widely get distributed more broadly. So, but that doesn't prevent the sponsor from applying for an ORLP grant for a different park in their community. So that's still okay as well. But one limitation that we do have right now is that if the site or park is currently getting an LWCF grant or has gotten one recently, then they're not eligible for an ORLP grant, even if it's for a different project. Because again, sort of underserved tends to be about lack of resources. So if you're already getting an LWCF grant, you're not quite as under-resourced as maybe someone else. And finally, public and private partnerships. So these are pretty integral to meeting the priorities of the ORLP program. And so criterion 3 of the funding opportunity, community involvement in and support of the proposed project, specifically assesses the level of supportive partnership building involved in the development and implementation of the project among the sponsor, the residents of the target community, government agencies, other government agencies, and the private sector, including community and conservation organizations. Partnership strength is demonstrated through both contributions of time and effort in developing the project, as well as through contributions, obviously, of cash towards your match, maybe donations of land, equipment to help with the project, or other kinds of resources to help you complete your proposed work. So in your proposal, you do want to be clear about who your partners are and what kind of support you're getting, and in terms of the project. But so there's different ways this is reflected. But again, if you want contributions for matching and financial leveraging, they do that actually does have to be part of your matching share. This is something that a lot of people miss. So I think I'll stop there again and see if there are questions about those.
There are a few. Can community engagement to determine the ultimate park design happen after the ORLP grant is awarded, with the community engagement approach and process documented in the application?
So I won't say that there can't be any designs for after the fact, but the community engagement really should happen up front. A lot of the determination about the impact of the process or the project is really about what amenities are planned, and and demonstrating how this meets the needs of the community. So if your proposal is sort of still at the stage of like, well, okay, here's our new park site, and we think it's likely to have these kinds of amenities, but if we're selected, then we'll do our public engagement and and figure out what it's actually going to be. That proposal isn't really ready enough to review, because it's really about it can't make it sort of a concrete case for how this project is going to meet the needs of the community.
Okay, the next question is, will these funds be passed through state DNRs? The funds will actually go to your state lead agency, and we have a link to them in a future slide. So each state has its own LWCF lead agency, and so the funds will go to them to subgrant to any of the selected projects.
ORLP and formula work the same way in that regard.
Right. Next question is, would program-related investments from foundations be acceptable toward match? These are low-interest loans that could be used, for example, for bridge financing.
Sorry, can you read that again?
Would program-related investments from foundations be acceptable toward match? These are low-interest loans that could be used, for example, for bridge financing. So can they use a loan as matching share that carries them through till they get their funding?
Well, no, because I mean, they have to pay the loan back, right? So I mean, there are certain kinds of costs that are, that are allowed to be incurred in advance of a grant, but generally, project expenses, whether they're paid for, by the grant or as part of the matching share, need to be incurred within the period of performance of the grant. So, so I'm not quite sure a loan would fit with that. But I think that might be one where it would be better to just contact us separately, with some more specifics, and we can try to figure out how that, might fit or not.
Okay, on the urban area map, a state park is within the urban area, has walkable access, and serves a jurisdiction greater than 50,000. However, the park boundary is cut out of the urban area map. Would a project at this state park be eligible if it meets the needs of an underserved community? So yes, Elizabeth said that, the project can abut the urban area or be just outside of it, provided that the community it's serving is within the eligible area of the urban area. Or the
Yeah, I mean,
eligible.
yeah. I mean, those boundary lines are drawn really at the tract level. So, I mean, if the park is big enough, it's not uncommon for it to be drawn out of the boundary because it's based on, where people live. And obviously there aren't, people living there are no homes in parks, hopefully. So yeah, so that's not uncommon. So if it's as long as it's along the boundary line, then that's okay.
Okay, we'll hit two more. Is project planning and design eligible?
Yes. And that's one of project planning and design is a kind of cost that can be incurred in advance of the grant, but it has to be within 3 years of the final application. So if you are doing that sort of work now, or you already have been doing it, definitely you want to keep good records on that, including when the work was done, obviously documenting the costs, and those can potentially form part of your matching contribution.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions on how to promote ORLP priorities such as financial and partnership support when they have to stand by for well over a year before the project will even be authorized? I think this is kind of like any public project. I mean, public projects just take a long time because of the government requirements. So I don't think that would hurt you in promoting the ORLP priorities. It is just something that has to be kept in mind. Now, and remember, you do still have the state assistance grants if this is a project that has to go through much sooner.
I will add, though, that one thing that we were able to do in spite of the pandemic last year was hire Ginger as our full-time ORLP coordinator. So I am hopeful that we will be able to speed up the timeline of the process more than has been done in the past when the program was being implemented as the part-time position of quite a few people.
All right, go to the next slide.
You.
All right. Oh, so I am taking over from here.
Yep.
Okay, so unlike the state formula grants and most other federal grant programs, the proposal submitted under the ORLP competition serves only as a pre-application. So if your project is selected under this grant round, this only means that your project appears eligible and it's scored high enough under the panel review for you and the state to be invited to complete a final application for NPS review. The final application includes additional project documents that are typical of state formula grants, and these documents are listed in the funding opportunity. The final review also requires the state, sponsor, and the Park Service to complete federal compliance reviews to determine the project's possible effects on the environment and any cultural resources in the area. Preparation of the application may also include adjustments to the proposed scope of work or the budget to address any issues or concerns that might have been identified by NPS or the merit panel during their review. So whether the project is awarded funding and the amount of that funding, it's only determined after the final application is reviewed, because sometimes new issues are come up during that final review. So here we're going to talk about some ways to avoid major application issues and hopefully help you ensure that you have a proposal that stands out. So first, you want to read through the funding opportunity completely. It's long and it's technical, but if you read through it and highlight important information and then review it again before submitting the application, you're more likely to ensure that you've addressed all the requirements of the current competition funding opportunity. Just remember that nothing says I didn't read the funding opportunity more than responding to last year's criteria or omitting any newly required materials. Next, you want to make sure that the project narrative and budget focus on the part of the project that would be funded by the ORLP grant if awarded. A lot of proposals are for a phase or a smaller portion of a larger project. And though it may be necessary to explain the larger project for context, the emphasis of the proposal should be the smaller project. This is true when describing the expected benefits as well. Many proposals tout the expected outcomes of the entire effort, even if the larger effort is still speculative or if it's something that's not eligible, such as a large indoor community rec center. Doing this could dampen the project score if reviewers assume this means that the ORLP project is not that impactful or not the focus of the effort. Next, you want to include all required elements in your pre-application. This year's competition includes newly required elements, including photos, a timeline, letters of support from all matching share contributors documenting their donations. So you can use the application checklist that's included under the related documents tab of grants.gov to make sure that you aren't missing any pieces of the package. And I will show you where that is on grants.gov in just a little bit. This is really important because an incomplete application is grounds for elimination. So a link to the funding opportunity, like I said, is in a later slide, and then I will take you there to show you where this tab is. The next thing is that you want to be clear and honest. So when you're responding to the criteria, make each point understandable to someone completely unfamiliar with a project. Be candid and open about problems and provide realistic plans to address the issues. If any required information is omitted, explain why and when you expect to have the information. Next, you want to support declarative statements. So back up statements of fact with data or citations of where or how the information was obtained. As an example, you could provide statistics on the poverty rates of the target community as compared to surrounding areas, the county or the state, and then also cite the sources and years of that information. You want to provide consistent information. You want to make sure that the information provided in each part of the application aligns with all other parts. This is particularly true with the budget information. State lead agencies in particular should review the budget as listed on the SF 424, the SF 424C, and in the budget narrative to ensure that all are reporting the same information prior to submitting the application. Additionally, the narrative must describe the project as detailed in the budget and vice versa. If the budget is for a small part of the larger project, but the narrative focuses on the larger project, reviewers will not be able to determine if the budget is appropriate. And finally, you want to keep in mind the reviewers. So reviewers will only evaluate the information provided in the narrative. You shouldn't expect reviewers to have time to do further research by following a hyperlink to a referenced source. And don't assume that the reviewers are familiar with your organization, your state, county, or city, or acronyms that may be common to you. You also don't want to overwhelm reviewers with excess information or try to hide issues by using vague language. Remember, they're going to be reviewing maybe 60 or more proposals, and so the harder you make it for them to understand the project, the lower your proposal will score. All right, Elizabeth, should we stop here for any questions?
We've had a couple come in. Let's see. I think we can hold them until the end. None are sort of particular to the information that you just presented.
Okay.
So,
All right. So we're going to hit just two types of projects that there are some special issues with. So with trail projects, funds can be used for the development of land or water-based trails that are primarily for the outdoor recreation activities that could include nature walks, hiking, biking, horseback riding, paddling, exercising, and even off-road vehicles. The trails can connect parks with communities or other parks. They may be within a park or serve as a standalone recreation feature. Because trails are usually part of larger systems, you want to be sure to explain how the target low-income community will use and benefit from the trail. So trails proposed primarily to connect regional networks or that have other primary purposes, such as improving commuting options, they're not likely to score very well. Another important consideration for trail projects is what is included in the proposed protected boundary. The boundary for a trail must include the trail and all park or other recreational resources the trail crosses, adjoins, or relies on to assure that the full benefits of the trail are retained and maintained. If the proposed trail is only connecting to other existing trails, enough of the overall trail must be included within the boundary to provide the full recreational experience as described in the proposal. And lastly, there are some common unallowable costs for trail projects that should be kept in mind. And those include non-capital improvement costs that might be like a trail counter, and any work outside of the protected boundary, such as street crossings that might be leading to entry points on the trail. School parks is the other type of project. So public outdoor recreation areas and facilities for coordinated use by the general public and public schools, that includes colleges and universities, are eligible for LWF assistance, provided that the facilities are not part of the normal and usual program and responsibility of the educational institution. This policy does not preclude exclusive school use of certain facilities such as athletic fields or tennis courts or swimming pools at certain times of the day for instruction or competition, provided the public outdoor recreation use remains the primary use, and provided there's public access at least half of the time. The grant application must include a schedule of the times the facility will be available to the public. Inadequate signage must be posted at the site indicating the days and hours the facilities are available to the general public. The project narrative should focus on how the general public will use and benefit from the project. The school's use and benefits will not increase the project score, and in fact could detract from the proposal if it seems that the students are really the intended beneficiaries, or that their use has the potential to be usurped to usurp or be prioritized over the general public's use. And also, you should be advised that shared school recreation sites are at high risk for conversions. So consider the anticipated growth of the community and the school's district capital needs. If school expansion is needed, you want to know if the school has other property where a school building could go, or would the recreation site be the most likely location for a new building? So adequate documentation must be provided in the application indicating the school district's or other entities' awareness of the agreement to the provisions of the LWCF Act. All right, so here is, I'm gonna leave the slides a little bit so we can, so I can show you a few things. Let me get down to where I need to be here. Okay, so here is the Grants.gov website, and we are under the funding opportunity. This is the funding opportunity number. You just put that in the search box and it'll bring you here. And then what you want to do is click on related documents. And there is a copy of the notice of funding opportunity. And there's copies of all the forms that we're going to be looking at. And you can download those and use them. Okay, next we are going to look at the notice of funding opportunity. And I just want to show you where two things are located. So in the table of contents, you can certainly just connect to whatever topic you want to. And please, again, read through all of this. Don't just jump around, but for what I want to show you, I'm just going to use the shortcuts. So under section D2, it's not showing up. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, I think it's just, I'm using too much of my screen or too much of my computer's brain to be able to get to that section. So I'm just going to tell you. So in section D2, that's where you have a list of all of the required elements of the application. And so it has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 sections under the required elements. There's also a listing of optional additional elements that you could submit but that aren't required. And that's also where the list of additional documents that would be required under the final application would be listed. So that's under section D2. And then the other place I wanted to show you was section E1, and that's where the criteria for the ORLP program are listed. And under each criteria, there is a statement of what is considered a priority for that criteria, and that lists basically what we are looking for in the ideal project. So it spells it out, what we hopefully see in your grant application. And then there are a bunch of bulleted points underneath explaining to you what we want you to answer under each of the criteria. So again, please read through those very carefully and make sure you respond to each of the bulleted points. And then we have changed the way we do the scoring. And so that is under the review and selection process. And you can basically look at that and try to judge your own project. You know, go through and evaluate yourself and see how well you think you do. So anyway, those are the areas I want you to look at in detail when you go to the NOFO. Okay, let's look at the actual forms. So let's start with the project narrative.
Actually, before you do that, Ginger, I do want to emphasize for everyone again that the criteria changed this year. So please look at the section of the NOFO if you don't look at any other section to make sure that you are responding to this year's criteria or the round 5 criteria and not criteria from a prior round, because we have had that happen.
Right.
We cannot score you on responses you don't give.
Okay, so this is the formatted project narrative. You do not have to use this form. This is just a suggested format, but if you don't use the form, at least refer to it to see everything that you need to have on your form. So basically, it has kind of some basic information at the top, couple check boxes so we understand what type of project it is. And over here, these are just notes to help you better understand how to answer those questions. There's a place just for a small project summary, and that's where you would just briefly tell us about what the larger project is, if what you're applying for is part of a larger project. And then you would also give a little explanation of what this application is specifically for the smaller part of the project. And then there is a space for a project overview, and that's where you're going to go into depth into the exact work that you're going to be doing if you are funded under a grant. And then following that, there is a space for each of your responses to the 6 criteria. Now, the 6th criteria actually has to do with the budget, so you can respond to that within the budget narrative. Let me bring that one up. Okay, here's a budget narrative. And so this is a 5-page limit, and I should have said it, the project narrative has a 10-page limit. This has 5-page. And again, you can see here everything that you should have in your budget. And we've listed all the different cost categories. And what you would do is under each cost category, you're going to have list every item that goes under that category. So you don't want to lump them. We don't want to see a single line under each of these. If you have several types of equipment, we want to see several lines under equipment. So be as detailed as you can, because the more detailed you are, the better we can see that you have prepared for this project, and we can see that the costs are reasonable and proper for the project. So in addition to the budget, there's also a place where you can list your matching share, the amount of the matching share, the source, the type, and also we want to know whether the matching share has been committed or if it's just in the process of being committed. You know, maybe you've submitted an application for another grant and you're waiting to hear back an answer for that. So we want to make sure that we know what you have in hand and what you are waiting on. And then again, there is a place to respond to criterion number 6. Okay, with the timeline, we don't have an actual timeline set up for you to fill out, but we have included a list of tasks or milestones that you might want to include in your timeline. So we don't want you to be too vague with your timeline. We really are trying to make sure that you understand all the pieces that are going to go into it. And we want to make sure that you understand we want to understand when you think this project will be completed. So there's a little information here. And one of the things to make sure that you include is time for the federal environmental and cultural resources compliance processes. For the NPS to complete its reviews, it can take a minimum of 1 year if no compliance supporting activities have been completed as of the date of the application. So that's a big thing to include in your timeline. So just make sure that you make time for that review. Okay, let's look at the the photo of the, yes, the photo images worksheet. So again, I have two, oh, there it goes. Okay, so maybe it's better if I bring this down the size. So in this form, and it'll show up better on your screen, but again, I just have so many things open, I don't think my computer is able to read it all. But there is a place, there you can see, where you can enter the name of the picture, browse to find the picture that you have on your computer, add it to it, and then it'll show up here. And then you can add a caption, so you can identify either the direction you're taking it, the location of the picture, or whatever it is you're trying to show us in the photo. You want to include the date taken and credit whoever took the picture in case we use it in any kind of publications or on the web or anything like that. So anyway, there's room for horizontal and vertical pictures within this form. And then finally, there is the application checklist, which again, you definitely want to do before you submit. So just make sure you go through and check off all these boxes and make sure that you have everything that you need. Again, these are the optional attachments, so these do not have to be submitted with the application. And then these are the list of the forms that will be required with the final application. But again, if you happen to be working with the state and these are done, then you can go ahead and submit them with this application as well. And just one more note, so the overall application should not exceed 40 pages in total. Again, reviewers could be reviewing 60 of these, so that's a lot to read. All right, let's get us back to the, okay, so, and again, here is the link to the grants.gov website so that you can find the opportunity there. All right, and just real quickly, we want to show you some examples of the maps that are required. So similar to applications for the LWCF state formula grants, the pre-application requires that you submit 3 maps. a location map showing where the park is in the community. But an additional element is that the map should show all other existing recreation resources within a 1/2 or 1 mile area of the project, depending on how many communities the project is serving. You also have to submit an LWCF boundary map showing the area that will be placed under permanent protection and ensuring that it stays in use for outdoor recreation in perpetuity. And then third, you're going to submit a plan of the site features that identify the location of the planned recreational improvements and other features. So just understand that the maps that we're showing you here are from proposals that were not necessarily selected, but we just thought that they were good examples of maps. And although the maps we're showing here are computer generated, you can do maps by hand, that's fine. We just want to make sure that the information is clear and complete. So for here, the location recreation maps, these both do a good job of showing the location of the project site and the existing recreational resources. And again, the extent of the area included on your map will depend on whether the project is serving one community or many. So using colors and keys are helpful if there's a wide variety of types of resources in the local area. Okay, so the LWCF boundary map should depict the parkland that you're proposing that will be placed under permanent protection. A lot of applications include a map only of the project area, which does not meet the requirement and could be grounds for your proposal to be eliminated. So this sample boundary map already has some of the elements that would be required for the final boundary map, including the name of the park, the proposed LWCF boundary line, a north arrow, and the total number of acres included in the area. Another key element is the park entrance or other access points. Also, if there are other, so these are other things you might want to include in a map. So would be the access points, or if there are reserved rights, such as utility rights of way, this should also be shown. If the project is selected, a final LWCF map will be signed by the parties and kept in the permanent project records. And as a reminder, even if your project will improve only a portion of a park, the entire park must be included in the boundary. Okay, and so this is the site plan map, and the site plan should be as detailed as possible for reviewers to get a clear idea of the final park project that will result from your project. So if additional work or amenities that are not part of the proposal are on the map, they should be clearly indicated so that reviewers understand what the ORLP funds and matching share will be paying for under the grant. And that is the last slide, except for our contact information. So if you are a project sponsor and you have questions, you want to start by contacting your state lead agency, as the state may have additional requirements that are part of the state competition. And states will generally contact us if they are unable to answer your question. However, if you're unable to reach the state, you can contact us as well. And so there is the link to the list of the state contacts and also email addresses for both Elizabeth and I.
Wow. Thank you, Elizabeth and Ginger, for that great presentation. That is a lot of detailed information, really helpful. We still do have some time, and this is what we had anticipated. It's about 4:10. We have about 20 minutes more. If we have enough questions, we can just keep going through them. And I just want to let you know that obviously if your question is not answered or if you have additional questions down the road, then you can always contact Elizabeth and Ginger directly. So why don't we head back to the questions?
Yeah, I will throw in, I did realize right after I stopped or handed things over to Ginger that I missed a key point on my last slide, which was the funding range. Someone actually asked a question about this. I'll start with this one, which was to just talk about what you can get. So this was, I don't know if you necessarily need to go back, Ginger, but so that we did this again. This was something that changed as a result of the increased funding this year for ORLP. So the minimum is still $300,000 like it was in round 4, but we've increased the maximum to $5 million for the project. And this is up from $1 million in prior years. So that's another big change that we want to highlight and make sure people know about.
Okay.
So anyway, so other questions that
Elizabeth, I see an interesting question. Did I hear you say that indoor recreation center is not eligible? And he asked this because our project is a facility that will be used as a base, such as staffing, equipment, for nature-based outdoor recreation within area parks, including the park where the facility will be located. Is this type of facility eligible?
So I would suggest checking out the LWCF manual and specifically chapter 3, which does talk about what kinds of indoor facilities may be eligible. I mean, what is described in the question sounds to me a little bit more like a park administration office rather than an indoor recreation center, but you know, there may be more detail about it. But indoor recreation centers are actually not eligible under LWCF or ORLP. You know, so other kinds of park facilities, support facilities can be, but that's one that isn't. But I will say it's sort of I mean, generally for people, because the point of the program is really about putting putting parks in communities that have none, we really want a lot of emphasis on outdoor. So, so unlike in LWCF where you can get support for certain kinds of, you know, like visitor centers or, you know, things like that, we're not going to fund anything like that under ORLP. We really want new things for people to play on outside. That's the goal. So if there is a minor indoor support facility, like a, you know, a restroom or something that's happening as part of a larger renovation, like that's fine. But an overall proposal that's really about an indoor facility, like that's not going to get funded. So
that
for that, you should go to the formula program.
Could add a restroom. I'm joking.
What's that?
So that indoor facility for staffing could add a restroom. I'm joking.
Well, and they often do, but again, for ORLP, we're really looking to increase the outdoor recreation opportunities. So support facilities are definitely something we want to downplay, and we would direct anyone who wants to do things like that to the formula program.
Okay.
What about, where does community engagement fit into the budget? What about park operations?
So community engagement, I mean, so sort of meetings about, you know, the park designs and sort of things like that. I mean, the cost of those could, you know, potentially be counted as part of the budget if they're incurred within a time, you know, in a time frame that works. And again, it's 3 years before the date of the final application. But park operation costs, those are, you know, kind of are not eligible for funding or for match. It really is about its cost associated sort of with the capital development.
There's a question about the deadline, which round 5 is due by state agencies by September 2021, correct? But that is unfortunately not correct. That's actually, the deadline is due to the National Park Service by September 24th, 2021. And each of the individual states have their own deadline. So folks should contact their state LWCF officer and ask when their state deadline is. It's all over the map. I know that California has already closed, and so you just need to check with your state liaison officer.
It's definitely, hopefully, if not for this round, the advice today will be useful for future rounds in case your deadline has already passed. So let's see. So someone asked about whether the budget can change from the pre-application to the formal. So I think it depends a little bit. I mean, obviously with the time gap, sometimes, you know, costs are going to sort of, you know, may shift a little bit. I think there's a certain amount of tolerance, you know, for costs changing if, you know, sort of some things are maybe more expensive or less expensive. If it gets to the point where it's a pretty dramatic change and actually whole elements have to start dropping out because, you know, you didn't request enough money, that could be more problematic because that, you know, that really starts to have implications for the project that you proposed. So, so there's a little bit of space for it, but maybe not something that would lead to real wholesale changes in the application you submitted.
I think there are a couple questions that are asking about changes for next year, you know, suggestions or, you know, is anything in the works? And I think we just need to say that, you know, we can't say what changes will be made for next year. You know, Census is updating their information. You know, there's these bills going through Congress to authorize the program, so there'll be talks with them, and I'm sure there will be discussions with the states again. So we really can't say what it's going to be next year. You know, it seems to have changed a little bit over the years it's been around. So it may change a little bit, it may change a lot, but right at this time, we really couldn't say.
Someone asked a question about just whether or not it's acceptable to combine the site plan and the LWCF boundary map on one map, and that's fine for the for the pre-application, but the final application would have a dedicated boundary map.
And someone asked if there are any good samples of projects and how they develop their application. And I think we are going to send you, City Parks is going to send out a list of projects that were selected under past years and what those projects were. But we don't have any sample applications because the application has changed each year. So it's really hard to put up a sample when you're trying to get somebody to respond to the current year's criteria. But we will send you the information on the type of projects that have been selected.
Yeah, and maybe I'll jump in here on that question as well. As a note of context, I work for the Trust for Public Lands, and we work nationally on parks, trails, schoolyards, and land protection with communities. And we've supported a number of sponsors and submissions and a significant number of awards over each round of ORLP. And we do that through both national grants work as well as through our state and local offices. And I'll add a little bit of commentary there from the applicant perspective, or from the proxy applicant perspective, that each application and award process, I saw a number of questions come through about both. They do vary from place to place. There's a few tips and tricks around just what makes a strong application, and I'm happy to share a couple of notes right now, realizing that we have limited time and want to get to more of the technical questions too, but just feel free to reach out if you'd like to discuss more. We have seen this be very transformational, and obviously want to see a lot of communities access this bigger round of funding this time. I'll just note that the state applications that you might be working on could look a little bit different from the national forms that are required in September. Take a look at that. As Elizabeth and Ginger both said, be sure to contact your state if you're interested, and do that quickly because the state deadlines are rolling. One thing that we found very helpful is that when you're thinking about an application in your park project, try and think about it cohesively as a park story. So as Elizabeth said, the need does need to be described very clearly. How does that gap, that barrier, or the need in the community relate to the project activities that are being proposed and the design that's being proposed? How will those elements then lead to impacts and outcomes related to city goals and to community needs? And don't be shy about highlighting unique aspects of your community. It's really important to remember the reviewers have no idea of where you're coming from. So the more that you can include local data and description, the better and the stronger your story can be. And data can be used broadly. That's inclusive of the things that were brought up on the webinar, like census data, as well as community derived information. So if you've done a survey, if you've heard from your community, explain how you've arrived at your decisions in the project. And there's tools out there. ParkServe, if you Google that, has a lot of data that is very locally driven and can be very specific to your project and help strengthen an application. And then, as has also been brought up, that cohesive tie should go through also between your budget form, your planned activities, and your concept maps to make sure that that's all very justifiable and help make sure that the reviewer can really do their job. So I'll stop there. Happy to discuss more, so feel free to be in touch. As I said, we do want to see a lot of communities access this fund, and thank you.
Yes, Bianca is a great resource, having gone through the application process many times.
We love grant proposals and this program.
We did, someone asked a question about combination projects, which is something we didn't really talk about. So one kind of grant that we do allow is under the formula program is a project that would include both acquisition and development in a single grant. And usually what that looks like is the land is being brought in as match, and then with the grant then funding the development. So we haven't really seen, there's maybe been a couple that hasn't been, so in fact, acquisition in general hasn't been sort of super common in the program, but given, the concerns about timing, what might work better, for something like that in this context would be, to think about the fact that we do allow sort of the two grants, and sort of, so a first grant for a site might be that acquisition grant, and then you could apply again a second time for development funding. Might be an easier way to handle that.
Okay, there's a question that says, could you clarify who conducts the environmental reviews for projects? Are those done by NPS staff, or are the grantees required to conduct the NEPA review? So it is, because this is a federal project, if we give you money, it is the NPS who has to do the official NEPA review. But there's certainly work that you could do ahead of time to save us time when it comes time for us to have to do that. But again, it is the NPS who actually does the NEPA and the Section 106 review, which is the review for cultural resources.
I would maybe characterize it a little bit more as a partnership. I mean, there's certainly certain parts of the process that that the NPS has to have the lead on. Like, so for example, if there needs to be an environmental assessment, the NPS is going to be writing, hopefully a FONSI or or something like that. But a lot of the the legwork, I mean, the initial drafting of studies and holding any required public meetings or hearings or things like that, that would be done more by the by the local sponsors. So I would say there's kind of more of a shared responsibility to the different steps. We got a couple questions about just timing in general, and those came in as well in the pre-question or pre-webinar solicitation window. So we're trying to, now with Ginger on board, we are hoping to get ORLP to be more of an annual cycle. Right now it's been kind of running every other year, which so far, which has kind of led to these long lead times. So we're hoping certainly to kind of get it on a more regular calendar, which will make it easier to for people to plan and know when the next funding round is coming. So someone did ask about round 6. We do not have a date for that yet, but we are hoping to get the results of this round announced by sort of the end of the first quarter of the next year, so around April. And then we would, by then we should know what the funding for FY22 is, and would be able to announce a new round at that point. We've also sort of hesitated to do announcements in advance of the funding, but certainly if it seems like the program, the program gets authorized and we know it's coming, then it's easier for us to go ahead and kind of run competition rounds, even if we don't know yet exactly how much we're going to get.
And that would be significantly faster than past rounds, getting announced by next spring, so that would be fantastic for everyone waiting, and great that Ginger's on board. Yeah.
Let's see. So we got a couple questions related to working with, or the project incorporating elements for homeless or unsheltered people. So so that would be sort of a new angle for us. I mean, I think there was a comment about this community being underserved as well, and I think that's true. I think it would really sort of come down to the nature of the proposal itself. I mean, if it's really, because the program is really sort of focused on putting parks in neighborhoods that don't have any. So I don't, so that's really sort of the target that we're going after. But I think if the project did have some elements, like for example, if there was a goal to sort of create job opportunities for homeless people, as a result of, new things that could be offered. So maybe new park maintenance jobs, or, sort of opportunities to work in a concession or something like that. That kind of innovation, I think, could be, could look attractive in an application. But paying for that as kind of a part of the grant, like an actual kind of jobs training like that, we can't fund things like that. But if that was something that was proposed as a part of the project, that would probably look attractive to reviewers.
Elizabeth, there's a question that is a common question and a good one, particularly with the Biden administration sending out some stimulus and relief. There's a statement in Section C of NOFO about projects seeking LWCF ORLP grants may not include funds from other federal sources in the project budget, even if the program match requirements are me. Is that exclusion of other federal funds just pertaining to match share, or exclusion of other federal funds applied to project budget as a whole?
So the latter. So unfortunately, it is something that's in the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act itself, that there cannot be other federal funds in the project. So regardless of the matching. However, when there are programs out there that do actually have authority to be counted as the non-federal share, so community development block grants is a good example, and probably one that we see the most. So if the program does have that sort of authorization, then that overcomes our restriction, but otherwise there can't be other federal dollars there.
I think we are winding down.
So, yeah, I guess we probably should have used the checkbox to go. Which ones did we answer?
There's one, we don't have matching funds identified yet, but we'll be starting a capital campaign soon. Can we use info from the anticipated funding, sources from the capital campaign as matching funds? I think you sort of addressed this, but yes, but specific funding examples would be more.
Yeah, I think for something like that, you'd really want to identify your backup plans. Sort of how, because one way or another, you have to sort of explain how you would be able to meet the match requirement. We do see that sometimes, like if there's, especially if they're still looking for other grants, sort of say like, well, if not this, then this. So that might be something to sort of do in this case, but we don't want sort of proposals falling for later because it was like, sorry, we couldn't actually come up with our match. Or it's, significantly downscaled because the fundraising was not as effective as hoped.
I think we have a time for a couple more. That was my little alarm telling me to. Is the grant administration eligible in ORLP this year? Something in the NOFO made me think yes, but worth double checking.
Well, so we did, so that was something else that we changed. In the past, we had, or in the past couple of years, we've had basically spending caps on certain kinds of categories. So it was 5% for grant administration, 10% for design and engineering, and 10% for contingency. And this year we just said there's just 25% for anything that's not a capital cost. So we're not going to worry about, because definitely trying to do the math on your proposals was something that took too much time. So now it's just like a carve out, and you can decide how to spend that, or you can include all of it for capital improvements. So, but otherwise, yeah, so it is still eligible within that context.
I think that's my cue to move on to wrap it up with the change. Okay, well, yeah, in the interest of time, that was our last question. Just a reminder, links to today's recording, the presentation, related resources will all be emailed to you. And again, remember, if your project is not eligible for an ORLP grant, it might be for an LWCF state formula grant. So explore that option. I know folks that get upset and frustrated with the population threshold and other requirements, but there is the stateside formula grants that are available. I'd just like to say thank you again for our participants for joining us today, giving an excellent presentation on the ORLP program, so much great detail. We, with our partners, NRPA, the Trust for Public Land, and the National Park Service, hope that this webinar has been helpful to you all. All of our webinars are listed on our webinars at cityparksalliance.org under the Events tab. Check there for future webinars and registration information. And if you're a member, you'll also find our full webinar archive so that you can view all the past webinar recordings. And then access to all of our webinars and our full webinar archive are just a few of the many resources available to City Park members. We hope that you will check them out. We also offer city workshops, urban park study tours, a resource library full of examples of MOUs and agreements and plans, so you can just cut and paste and not start all over. A job bank, and discounts to our biannual Greater and Greener Conference, which is going to be in Philadelphia this 2022. And if you're not a member, we encourage you to join. Again, a big thanks to all of our sponsor, our presenters, and all of our attendees for helping to make CPA's webinar a big success. We encourage you to fill out the short evaluation that will pop up after the session concludes. And I just want to say thank you again, and thank you for supporting our nation's urban parks.